So now let me begin by giving you the overview of this presentation. We want to look at the concept of social accountability, explore some of the context of social accountability, look at the benefits, and then also some of the strategies of social accountability. Then we'll look at challenges, and hopefully within 1 hour, we will begin. Now, the concept of social accountability. And in this session, we want to understand the meaning of social accountability. We want to understand the key proposition. This is important. The key proposition of any assumptions of social accountability. We want to look at the framework of social accountability and the mechanisms of social accountability. That is what we want to look at under the concept of social accountability. What then is social accountability? Before we get to that, we want you to understand what is accountability. And we all agree, from the discussion we've had so far, we all agree that accountability is the obligation of power holders to account for or take responsibility for their actions. And we say, who are the key power holders? We refer to as power holders to account for their actions and be responsible. So who are the key power holders in this case? And the key power holders may include the government officials and its agencies. Look, for instance, local government, parliament, civil society organizations are also part of these agencies. Service providers can also be considered as power holders. The schools, the health centers, they are power holders because they have power to provide service. And we have community leaders. Community leaders are also power holders. They have the mandate of the people to lead them, to provide service, engage them in all kinds of activities. So they are power holders. It's all of this category of people are considered as power holders, and they must be held accountable and be responsible for their actions. And the power holders can also be held accountable for their conduct and adherence to rules. So when we say they must be accountable, it means that they must conduct and be adherent to the rules of the game, and also be accountable for their performance. So if you are given a job and you're supposed to deliver, you must deliver based on the terms. That is another way of ensuring accountability. What is social accountability then? Social accountability, as you might have known, is the approach towards building accountability that relies on civic engagement or engagement of beneficiary in the process of ensuring accountability, where ordinary citizens and their organizations participate directly or indirectly in the process of ensuring accountability. And that is the most, and we say social accountability is also demand-driven or bottom-up, in a sense that it is something that we can initiate from the grassroots level upward, and then can also be a supply-driven. You will understand why I mentioned this too, that it is bottom-up approach, at the same time it could be a supply-driven process. All about improving accountability and improving development outcome. It is also with the effectiveness of non-conventional accountability approaches to improving governance depends on what? Civic engagement. Even if government considers other non-conventional accountability approaches, they will only be effective if there is citizen engagement. The potential risk of ineffective accountability pose significant threat to development effectiveness. So we reach therefore, social accountability has that potential to do what? To improve governance and accountability, to contribute to improve value for money. This is important. If you put in money, a lot of money, and of course, by research, we know many countries, the governments are so much concerned about public service. They are willing to spend, but the value for money is important, which means that the outcome of the service is what is mostly important, not the provision of the service, the outcome of the service. So when you have the outcome of the service increase, then the value for the money increases. So that is what social accountability promises. enhance development outcome, which is the same as what we just said. So now let's look at some key benefits associated with social accountability, which is the next section we want to look at. Now, under this section, we want to look at the development benefit associated with social accountability. We want to look at the main beneficiaries of social accountability, and then the different ways in which social accountability dividends benefit citizens, government, and civil society organizations. Now, so this is just here. The first, then these are the benefits. We summarize them into 4. Social accountability produces credibility of government. It produces empowerment of citizens. It leads to development effectiveness and good governance. These are the 4 main areas that we have summarized the effects of social accountability.
Multi-stakeholders and for greater effectiveness. And that includes some state actors, it could be local governments, parliaments, central government, citizens, different donors, private sector, universities or think tanks, civil society organizations, the media, etc. And the important thing is that these stakeholders, they must respond very dynamically to service performance constraints, and they must be committed, have genuine commitment, and respond responsibly to wanting to achieve more effective outcomes. So there's just some questions to begin to make us think on how do we begin to address this issue of accountability in service delivery, or social accountability. So who are the main actors and stakeholders? What is their degree of power? How much influence do they actually have? What are these different stakeholders' main duties and operations under their control? What is their capacity? What discretion do these different stakeholders have in over their specific actions? What interest do they have in influencing the process? Are there any consequences for these stakeholders if they do not follow these specific processes? Do they have any risks of, if there's corruption, for example, do they run any risks? Are there any reprimands or not? Is it accepted in the culture or not? So are there any social norms attended to that again they will reprimand, or this kind of misbehavior, and how do these different norms affect how the different stakeholders perceive their interests? So we have policies and then we have practices. Basically, what happens de jure and de facto. We can classify some of the enabling factors under the policy area as access to information laws, laws that govern NGOs, laws that govern the regulation of the media, and then the judicial system. So access to information in practice, for example. Some questions to think about are there audits to check and compare the progress of the service, the quality of service? Are there any administrative guidelines that have been understood and publicized? Again, Gabriel touched upon some of these things yesterday. What is sort of the institutional culture of the ministry or the service provider? And looking at the media, for example, does the media have the ability to cover some of the key issues? We began to think about some of these things during our icebreaker yesterday, and we had different views about this. For example, in many countries, the media is paid to cover particular topics or to cover them in a particular way. Is the media biased? Is it not? Does the media have capacity? How can this sector be strengthened? Then there's certain cultural practices. For example, in rural areas, do the local authority, how much power do the local authorities have? For example, if you could use secret ballots as a tool to learn about what people really think. For example, about their leaders, if these local leaders have a lot of power. Also, what is the political context at the local level, at the central level in the country? what are the power structures and dynamics, and what is the role of some of the local party organizations? These are just some questions to think of. This, again, thinking about enabling factors and information and access to information, the role of information, that's also an issue that we discussed a lot, that it came up in many of the discussions yesterday. I wanted to share this map with you, which is a few years old. It's from 2003, so there may be some small changes. But basically, what this map of the world shows is that the countries that have access to information laws, and the countries highlighted in green are the countries who have comprehensive access to information laws. Again, going back to Gabriel's presentation, he mentioned the case of India and their Right to Information Act and the influence that had over that employment, the National Rural Employment Program, for example, and many other cases as well. So, for example, India is highlighted as green. Then you have countries highlighted in yellow, which are countries that have access to information laws, but they have not been enacted yet. But there are some laws that have been, that they're working on the laws. And then the countries in white have no law at all. And so again, we see that the Middle East and North Africa region does not have any country yet. In the Africa region, we do have South Africa is the only country that has a full access to information law.